Can a simple lunch rewrite your entire life? She walked in quietly, no security detail, no designer heels, no flash of cameras, just an older woman with soft eyes and silver strands tucked behind her ears, stepping into a modest diner called Sunnyside Eats. No one recognized her as the former face of Forbes. No one knew that the woman sitting silently in the corner had once shaken the pillars of global finance. But today, Elizabeth Harrington wasn't here to be seen. She wasn't chasing power. She wasn't chasing wealth. She was chasing something that shattered 20 years ago and somehow still hurt like it was yesterday. And here's the strange thing about life. Sometimes you have to step far away from everything you own just to get close to what you've lost. With no Bentley parked out front and no assistant checking her watch, Elizabeth sat alone, just her and a cooling cup of coffee. The years had softened her presence, but behind those quiet eyes there was something heavy, something unresolved. Waitstaff came and went, some barely glancing her way. To them, she was just another face in the crowd, until she appeared. A young woman with a gentle smile, a frayed apron, and a pace just steady enough not to get complaints, yet never fast enough to be remembered by name. Elizabeth's eyes followed the girl, and something inside her twisted. She didn't know why. She just knew. She had seen those eyes before, somewhere distant, somewhere deep, somewhere buried in a time long gone. The girl smiled softly, set the cup of coffee down, and turned to walk away. As she moved, the light above caught the curve of her neck just enough to reveal a delicate glint beneath her collar, a small gold necklace with a butterfly engraved on it. And in that single moment, Elizabeth's entire world tilted, because she had seen that necklace before, not in a dream, but in a photograph she had held onto for 2 decades, a photograph that whispered, "There is a part of your heart that's never been laid to rest." Her name was Elizabeth Harrington, a name etched into the memory of every financial publication, every global investor, every young MBA who'd ever studied a success story. Chairwoman of Harrington Holdings, a multinational empire spanning real estate, tech, healthcare, and education. The first woman to lead a trillion-dollar company by the age of 45. To the media, she was the ice queen of Wall Street, a woman who always wore neutral suits and never blinked in a negotiation. But what the media never knew was that inside her 12,000-square-foot mansion tucked away in the suburbs of New York, there was one room that always remained locked. Behind that door was a wall covered in images, hundreds of grainy prints from public surveillance cameras, orphanage records, missing persons sketches, and right in the center, taped with precision and reverence, was one small photo, a little girl with brown hair, wearing a yellow floral dress, grinning wildly beside a butterfly-shaped birthday cake. Her name was Lily, Elizabeth's only daughter, who vanished 20 years ago during a warm, sunlit afternoon in Santa Clara Central Park, California. One moment she had looked down to answer a phone call. Just one moment, and it took everything. Elizabeth had hired hundreds of private investigators, spent millions in reward money, and chased every possible lead. But time has a way of dulling even the sharpest screams. The media moved on. Family told her to learn to accept. Board members began to whisper that you can't run a global company while chasing a ghost. And her husband, the only man who had ever made her believe in the idea of family, passed away a few years later. No illness, no accident. He simply could not bear to live in a world without Lily. Since that day, Elizabeth stopped believing in miracles. She buried herself in work, moving like a machine. Every contract signed, every million earned, none of it could fill the empty space behind the tiny yellow chair in her living room. The chair where Lily used to sit, wide-eyed, listening to bedtime stories. On the outside, she was a titan of industry. But on the inside, she was a heart slowly rotting from the part that had been ripped away. And then, on that very day, a bright afternoon in California, the same place she had once sworn never to return to, she walked into a modest little diner called Sunnyside Eats, not because she was hungry, but because something inside her whispered, "There's something here you've left unfinished." California, the state that had stolen the light from Elizabeth's life, had become a name she refused to utter. For 2 decades, she had flown over it hundreds of times, but never once landed. To her, Santa Clara wasn't a destination. It was a scar that never closed, a life sentence with no chance of parole. And yet, on one April afternoon, when her private jet suffered an unexpected malfunction and was forced to make an emergency landing in San Jose, Elizabeth knew this wasn't coincidence. A rescue helicopter had been dispatched, but she refused it. Elizabeth couldn't explain why. She just knew her heart was racing faster than usual, as if some invisible thread was pulling her back to this very ground. "Just one afternoon," she told her assistant. "No meetings, no calls, no one needs to know I'm here." She rented a regular car, no chauffeur, no security detail, and began driving aimlessly through the quiet streets lined with blooming cherry blossoms. She didn't have a destination, but her heart knew she was searching for something. No name, no address, just a feeling. And then, at a quiet intersection where 2 sleepy roads met, she saw it, a bold red sign that read, "Sunnyside Eats, homemade meals and warm smiles." A tiny diner with a humble facade, so unassuming that the Elizabeth from a year ago would have passed it without a second glance. But this time, she stopped, turned off the engine, stepped out of the car. There was something about that name that softened her chest. Sunnyside. Was it because it reminded her of Sunny Park, the park where Lily vanished? Or was it the words "warm smiles"? That stirred a memory of her daughter's dimples, the way they'd crease when she laughed. Elizabeth stepped inside. The doorbell chimed a simple, cheerful sound that somehow made her eyes sting. No one in the diner turned. No one whispered, "Is that Elizabeth Harrington?" No one stood to greet her. And for the first time in years, she felt a strange, unfamiliar feeling. Relief. She chose a small table in the corner, her back to the wall, quiet enough to listen, tucked away enough not to be seen. The room buzzed with the soft clatter of spoons on plates, children's giggles and grown-ups asking each other, "How was your day?" sound so ordinary, and yet Elizabeth couldn't remember the last time she had truly heard them. And then she walked in. A young woman, brown hair, warm brown eyes, no makeup, no performative smiles, just a quiet kindness that seemed to flow naturally with every step she took. "Good afternoon, Ma'am. What can I get you today?" the girl asked gently. Elizabeth looked up, and for a moment, time stopped. Not because of her face, not because of her voice, but because of something in those eyes, something that made Elizabeth's heart ache. Elizabeth had never believed in fate. She believed in numbers, in logic, in what could be tracked, measured, and controlled. But those eyes, the eyes of the young waitress standing at her table, shattered every law Elizabeth had ever trusted. In one fleeting moment, when she looked up and locked eyes with that soft shade of brown, she was no longer in a diner. She was back in time, holding Lily's tiny hand on the way to preschool, hearing her daughter's whimper turn into laughter the moment she scooped her up, remembering the way those little eyes used to look at her like her mother was the entire universe in one person. "No," Elizabeth whispered inside her own mind. "It can't be. It's too much of a coincidence." The girl stood calmly, holding a small notepad, her smile polite and effortless. "I'll bring you a hot coffee," she said gently. "Let me know if you need anything else. Okay?" Elizabeth gave a small nod, keeping her voice level. "Just the coffee, thank you." The girl dipped her head in a quiet gesture of respect and walked away, weaving through the tables with a steady, unhurried pace. There was something in the way she moved, the way she tilted her head to listen, the subtle furrow of her brow when someone asked for more napkins that made Elizabeth's heart tremble. It wasn't the way she looked. It was something deeper, something in her, a gentleness, a patience, and that rare kind of strength that doesn't shout but never, ever breaks. Elizabeth watched her from a distance. The girl chatted with an elderly customer like she was speaking to her own grandmother warmly, genuinely, with a smile that was real, yet tinged with something quietly sorrowful, as if life had taught her to give more than she ever expected to receive. When the girl returned with the coffee, Elizabeth noticed it. Peeking out from beneath the collar of her shirt, a delicate gold chain, and hanging from it, a pendant, small, intricate, a butterfly with a rose etched into its wings. Elizabeth froze, her breath caught in her throat. That necklace, she knew it. She had designed it. No, not the same one, but a perfect replica. It was the necklace from Lily's 5th birthday photo. A custom-made gift, a symbol of the two of them. The rose for Elizabeth, the butterfly for Lily. "That's beautiful," Elizabeth whispered, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "That necklace, was it from your mother?" The girl paused, just for a heartbeat, then gently smiled, her fingers brushing the pendant with tender familiarity. "Yes, my mum gave it to me when I was little, but I don't remember her face. I grew up in foster care. This necklace, it's the only thing I have left of her." Elizabeth sat still, absolutely still. Her hands trembled beneath the table. No, no. This couldn't just be a coincidence anymore. As the girl turned away to tend to another table, Elizabeth quietly reached into her purse. From a hidden pocket, one she had carried with her for over 2 decades, she pulled out a photo, its corners worn and creased from time and grief. It was from that birthday. The 5th one, Lily in a yellow dress, wrapped around her mother's neck in a tight embrace, and glimmering under the soft glow of birthday candles, the butterfly and rose necklace. And now, that same necklace, an exact match, was around the neck of the young waitress across the room. Elizabeth's heart pounded wildly. Her mind screamed, "Wait, don't jump to conclusions." But her heart, the heart of a mother who had lived through unrelenting loss, whispered something else. "Lily, is it really you?" Elizabeth had never put stock in destiny. But now, she had no choice but to believe in the voice inside her chest. The coffee in front of her had long gone cold. The photo in her hand trembled slightly, her fingers no longer steady, her breath uneven. She sat frozen in place for nearly 10 minutes, watching the girl with unblinking eyes, afraid that if she blinked, if she looked away, even for a second, she might lose her. All over again. The girl returned, this time carrying the check and that same polite, gentle smile. "I hope the coffee was to your liking," she said softly. Elizabeth clenched the photo just a little tighter in her hand. She looked up, and this time, she couldn't hide the emotion welling in her chest. "Would you sit with me for a moment?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. The girl hesitated for a second, perhaps not used to being invited to talk by a customer, but then nodded quietly. She slid into the seat across from Elizabeth, folding her hands neatly on her lap. "What's your name?" Elizabeth asked gently. "Anna," the girl replied. "Anna Grace." That name, it pierced Elizabeth like a needle through silk. Grace. It was the very middle name she had once chosen for Lily, named after her own grandmother. It could have been a coincidence, but it was already too much to ignore. Elizabeth took a breath, holding back the storm inside her. "Anna, I'd like to ask you something. It's a bit personal. I hope that's okay." "Of course," Anna replied, her tone calm, open. Elizabeth looked into her eyes, so deep, so still, like staring into an ocean of memories long buried beneath the surface. "That necklace you're wearing," she said softly. "Who gave it to you?" Anna's fingers instinctively reached up to touch the pendant, a familiar, affectionate gesture, as if comforting herself without even thinking. "It was a birthday gift from my mum," Anna said softly. "She gave it to me when I was really little, but I don't remember what she looked like. She disappeared or maybe passed away. I don't really know. I grew up in foster care, went through a lot of different homes." Elizabeth felt a lump rising in her throat. Memories she had locked away long ago were suddenly crashing back, like a wave she could no longer hold back. "Do you have anything else from her?" Elizabeth asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Anna shook her head, offering a sad, gentle smile. "No, just the necklace. It's the only thing I've always had with me. Whenever I feel lost, I touch it." She reached up again, brushing her fingers against the pendant. "It reminds me that I'm not really alone." Elizabeth sat in silence for a long moment. Then, slowly, with hands still trembling, she reached into her lap and placed the worn photograph on the table, sliding it gently toward Anna. "Would you take a look at this for a moment?" Anna leaned forward and picked up the photo. Her eyes widened. It was a little girl in a yellow dress, wearing the exact same butterfly and rose necklace wrapped tightly around the neck of a woman with eyes that mirrored her own. She looked up, her gaze flicked from the photo to Elizabeth, then down to the necklace on her chest, and back again. Her hand began to tremble. "Well, who are you?" Anna whispered. Elizabeth didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached out and gently touched the photograph, her fingertip resting on the little girl in the yellow dress. Then she looked up straight into Anna's eyes, eyes that mirrored her own, eyes she had waited 20 years to see again. "I'm the woman who lost you, and who's been searching for you every single day since." Her voice broke. "My daughter's name is Lily, but I used to call her Anna. It was the nickname her grandmother gave her when she was little." Anna sat frozen. The world around them seemed to pause. The clinking of plates, the hum of voices, all of it faded. She stared at the photo, then at the woman across from her, the one with tears in her eyes, but a love so fierce it couldn't be hidden anymore. And suddenly, all the questions swirling inside her collapsed into one. Is it really true? Have I finally been found? Anna didn't move. Her hands still clutched the photograph, but her eyes were locked on the woman in front of her, the woman who had just shattered and rebuilt her entire reality in a single sentence. "I'm your mother," Elizabeth repeated. This time, her voice steady, full, no longer trembling, only overflowing with the quiet, unstoppable power of a love that had never died. "No." Anna shook her head instinctively, her voice cracking. "No, that can't be true. My name is Anna Grace. I don't have a family. I grew up in the state system foster care. My birth mother left me. No, sweetheart." Elizabeth gently cut her off, her voice both soft and unwavering. "You weren't abandoned. You were taken from me. It was a sunny afternoon in Santa Clara Park. You had just turned 5. I looked away for seconds to answer a phone call." Her voice began to quiver, her eyes now glistening, but no longer lost, not anymore. Because in front of her was the part of her heart she had spent 20 years grieving, now flesh and blood, breathing, alive. "You loved blowing soap bubbles. You hated clowns, but adored spiders so much that I had to stick a rubber spider on the fridge just to keep you from sneaking cookies. Every night, you made me sing 'You Are My Sunshine' before you'd fall asleep." Anna sat frozen. Something inside her began to stir. She didn't remember, not fully, but something deeper than memory began to ripple. A soft voice singing, a yellow dress, a garden that smelled like roses, fragments, fleeting, like puzzle pieces blurred by time. But suddenly, starting to fit. "If you need time," Elizabeth whispered, "I'll wait. I've waited 20 years. A few more days. That's nothing." Anna let out a soft, trembling sob. Not from disbelief anymore, but because her heart was pounding so fast, she couldn't deny what it already knew. I don't know what to say," she choked out. "My whole life, I believed I was abandoned. I went from house to house, always trying not to get too close to anyone, because I was afraid they'd leave too." Elizabeth leaned forward ever so slightly, her hand resting gently on the table. She didn't reach for Anna. She simply placed it close, like an invitation, not a demand. "I never abandoned you. Anna, I've searched for you. Every year, I reprinted that photo. Every year, I hired new investigators. Every birthday, I lit a candle for you. I never stopped believing, no matter how many people told me I should let go." Anna looked at her, and for the first time, her eyes softened, not because she fully believed, but because she wanted to believe. And then, slowly, tentatively, she reached out. Her hand found Elizabeth's. Just a gentle touch. But in that fragile, quiet moment, something broke open. Something old. Something aching. Something sacred. Elizabeth began to cry. Not the kind of tears that come from pain, but the kind that come from finally finding your way home. Anna looked at her, eyes glassy, lips trembling. "Are you really my mother?" Elizabeth nodded. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. She simply opened her arms. A hug that had been waiting 20 years to be finished. Anna sat still for just a few seconds, and then she collapsed into her. "Mom." The word escaped her lips like a breath she'd been holding her entire life. Her voice broke into sobs as she buried herself in the arms of the woman she never thought she'd find. Elizabeth held her tightly, not out of fear that Anna would disappear again, but because, for the first time in 2 decades, her heart was whole. That embrace could have ended the story, could have been the final scene of a long-lost reunion. But for Anna, it was the beginning of something else. A door opening into a storm of questions that had waited in silence all these years. She pulled back, still clutching Elizabeth's hand, but her eyes now flickered with confusion. I don't understand," she whispered. "If I really am your daughter, then why didn't anyone find me? Why didn't anyone say anything? Why now? Why today?" Elizabeth nodded, as if she had expected this, prepared for the moment when the child she had been searching for would finally dare to voice the questions her heart had never stopped asking. "You have every right to wonder," she said gently. Because I've asked those same questions thousands of times. I searched for you, Elizabeth continued, her voice tight with memory. From the moment you vanished, I never stopped. Police, media, private investigators, I chased every lead. I left no stone unturned. She paused, her throat tightening. But it was like the entire world had swallowed you whole. Her voice broke again. They told me I had to accept it. They told me you were gone, dead. But I never believed them, because my heart never stopped aching, and it never stopped waiting. Anna lowered her head, her own voice unsteady. But I don't remember any of that. All I know is I was placed in the system when I was really young. They told me my parents abandoned me, and I guess I learned not to trust anyone after that. She looked up again, eyes glossy with tears, but shining with something else, raw honesty. I had to learn to survive on my own. I taught myself how to cook, how to make money, how to take care of a fever in the middle of winter. And most of all, I taught myself not to love anyone too much, because by morning, they might be gone. Elizabeth didn't interrupt. She let Anna speak it all, because she knew pain that isn't spoken aloud stays buried forever. So now, Anna's voice cracked through the silence. Now I'm supposed to believe that everything I thought was a lie, that my mother didn't abandon me, that I've actually been loved for 20 years without even knowing it. Her breath caught mid-sentence, tangled in disbelief and longing. Elizabeth reached for her hand this time, holding it tighter. I can't give you back the years you spent alone, she said softly. But I can tell you this: every single minute, every second, I was praying to find you. Every birthday, I kept your room exactly the same. Every toy, every book, every nightlight still waiting. And today, it was you. Your necklace, your eyes. You brought yourself home. Anna sat in stillness for a long, long moment. No tears, no smile, just a deep, searching gaze, as if she were sifting through every drawer in her mind, trying to find one thread, one truth that could connect who she was to who she had just discovered she might be. I want to believe, she whispered. I really want to believe. Elizabeth nodded, tears silently falling down her cheeks. Then let your heart open slowly. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. However long it takes, I will wait. Anna looked at her, at the woman who had been a question mark her entire life, and for the first time, instead of bracing herself, she nodded, a small, quiet nod, but one that carried 20 years of weight. A nod, uncertain, but enough to begin. They sat there, two souls bound by a thread that had been severed 20 years ago, now trying to tie it back together, one trembling word at a time. Anna had stopped crying, but her eyes were still rimmed red. She didn't speak. She just looked at Elizabeth, not with suspicion, but with something quieter, heavier, as if her heart was asking, "Tell me everything, from the beginning. No walls, no missing pieces." Elizabeth understood. She gently pushed aside the cup of cold coffee, took a deep breath, and began. "It was your 5th birthday," she whispered. "We took you to Sunny Park. That was your favorite. They had that bounce house you loved, and the strawberry ice cream truck you always ran to. Your father had brought his new camera to take pictures. I remember you insisted on wearing that yellow dress, even though it was already too cold for it." A fleeting smile crossed her lips, then her face darkened. "Everything was normal until I got a phone call. A partner called there was an issue with a deal in Europe. I turned away just for a minute. When I looked back, you were gone." Anna shivered slightly. The words were soft, but they struck like thunder. "I screamed your name," Elizabeth said softly. "All over the park. Everyone joined the search. The police came. They set up barriers, reviewed security footage, questioned everyone. But there was nothing. No sign of you leaving. No one saw anyone take you. It was like you vanished in broad daylight." She paused, her voice hollowed by the weight of memory, like she was reliving a nightmare that never ended. "I didn't sleep for weeks. Your father, he completely fell apart. He blamed himself, said if only he'd held your hand, kept you close, taken you along instead of letting you run ahead." Elizabeth swallowed hard. Her voice cracked, but she pushed through. A few years later, he passed away. No accident, no illness. His heart just stopped. The doctors called it sudden cardiac arrest. But I knew the truth. He didn't want to live in a world without you anymore. Anna raised a trembling hand to her lips. She gasped, not out of pity, but because something in that story stirred something deep within her. Something buried, something real. I think I remember." She closed her eyes, trying to hold on to the flicker of memory before it faded. "A garden with roses and a man. He lifted me high up in the air and called me his little princess." Elizabeth nodded, her eyes glistening with tears. "That was your father," she whispered. "And that garden, it's still there, right outside our home." Anna sat in stunned silence. All her life, she believed she was a nameless child abandoned, unwanted. But now she was beginning to see the pieces of a life she never knew she had. A child who had been loved, who had been searched for, who had been worth everything to her parents, even their lives. "After you disappeared," Elizabeth continued, "I ordered a full sweep of every adoption record in every state. But your name had been changed. No one knew that Lily Grace Harrington had become Anna Grace. And no one ever thought to check the necklace." She let out a breath, a quiet ache in every word. Because who would believe that something so small could carry someone's entire fate? Elizabeth reached into her bag and pulled out a worn folder. She handed it gently across the table. "This is your file," she said. "I just got it last week from the private investigator's office. You can run a DNA test whenever you want. You don't have to believe me right now. I only need you to know this one thing. You were never abandoned." Anna looked down at the papers, then up at Elizabeth. She didn't need to read a single word. She could see it in the eyes in front of her, in the voice that hadn't wavered, in the love that had never left. Because in that moment, Anna understood. Those eyes, the ones she had seen in the mirror her entire life, never quite matching anyone else's in the foster system. They finally made sense. They had found their origin, their home. She said nothing more. She didn't need to. Her body trembled slightly, not from fear, but because an entire world inside her was cracking open and being reborn from a girl who had learned to survive by being strong, by staying guarded, by needing no one. Anna suddenly felt as small as that 5-year-old child who had once been torn from her mother's arms without understanding why. Elizabeth didn't move. She didn't rush. She simply sat there, silent, still, her hand resting open on the table, waiting. 10 seconds passed. It felt like a lifetime. And then Anna stood, slowly, tentatively. She stepped around the table, and in one small, unassuming moment, in a noisy diner filled with clinking dishes and idle chatter, something extraordinary happened. Anna bent forward and wrapped her arms around Elizabeth, tightly, fully, without hesitation, without logic, without fear. Just a hug, the kind of hug that says, if I let go, I might lose you all over again. Elizabeth held her too, her arms trembling but strong, as if she were holding the entire world right there in her embrace. A mother who had cried for 20 years, not knowing her child was still alive. A daughter who had spent her whole life believing she didn't belong to anyone. Now they held each other in the middle of a modest diner, surrounded by strangers, by the soft clatter of spoons and the hum of conversation, as if none of it existed anymore. Just them, mother and daughter. It wasn't a long hug, but it was long enough to reach every tired cell that had lived too long without love. Elizabeth whispered, her voice shaking, "You're here now. I found you." Anna buried her face into her mother's shoulder, like she had finally come home to where she had always belonged. I'm sorry," she murmured. Elizabeth leaned back just enough to place both hands on her daughter's cheeks. Looking straight into her eyes, she said, "No, you have nothing to be sorry for. All you need to know is that I never stopped looking for you." They gazed at each other for a long moment, and Anna's eyes, now brimming with tears, were no longer the eyes of a girl left behind. They were the eyes of someone who had just come home. Elizabeth leaned in and kissed her daughter softly on the forehead, her voice catching, but filled with more love than a lifetime could hold. "I thought I'd never get to do this again," Elizabeth whispered, her lips trembling as she kissed her daughter's forehead. Anna squeezed her hand tightly. "Then we start over, from today." "Right, Mom." Elizabeth nodded, her grip firm, her eyes unwavering. "Yes, from this very moment." The diner had begun to empty. Outside the window, the afternoon sun was lowering, casting soft golden light across the sill. Warm, but gentle, like a promise. Anna stayed close to Elizabeth, their hands still locked together, as if letting go might dissolve the whole moment like a dream. But inside her, the storm hadn't passed. She turned and looked at Elizabeth again. Those eyes, kind, open, so full of truth and unwavering love, were still on her. And for a girl who had spent her life building walls, learning to live unseen, untouched, unclaimed, to be seen like this so clearly, so completely, felt terrifying and sacred. I don't know what to do next, Anna murmured, her voice barely a breath. Everything that just happened. It feels like a movie. But this is real life. And in real life, I've gotten used to not having anyone. Elizabeth didn't speak. She didn't interrupt. She simply let the silence be a safe space, a quiet reassurance. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do for someone who's always had to be strong is to let them be uncertain and stay anyway. Elizabeth understood this was a moment Anna had to face on her own. Anna lowered her head, and when she finally spoke, her voice trembled like a child admitting something too fragile to say out loud. There's a part of me that wants to hug you so tight, run out of this diner with you and believe that everything's going to be okay from now on. She paused, then added quietly, but there's also a part of me that whispers, be careful. Don't believe too fast. Don't hand over your heart, just to have it shattered again. Elizabeth reached for her hand again, not forcefully, just steady, just there. You have every right to be scared, every right to doubt. For 20 years, you survived on your own with no one to guide you. I don't expect you to trust me overnight. All I ask is a chance to be beside you, however long it takes. Anna nodded softly, barely a motion. Then her gaze drifted out the window, to a group of children laughing and playing outside a corner store. She had once been a child like that, but then she was thrown into a world no one explained, where everything she touched felt like it could be taken away. Love, family, a home, a promise. She had learned not to hold on to anything too long, because everything eventually disappeared. And yet, now those very things she had feared to believe in were standing right in front of her, held out in the open palm of a mother who offered nothing but truth and patience. I'm not sure I can live in your world, Anna admitted, voice barely above a whisper. Big house, staff, fancy parties. I don't know how to act. I don't know what to wear, what to say. Elizabeth smiled, brushing a strand of hair gently behind her daughter's ear. I don't need you to know any of that. All I need you to know is one thing. You are loved. Not because you're polite or talented or perfect, but because you're my daughter, and that is enough. Anna looked at her. That gaze no longer closed off, but not fully open either, somewhere in between, like a window cracked just enough to let the air in. So, What if I said I need time? Elizabeth nodded without hesitation. Then I'll wait. A day, a month, or however long you need. I've waited 20 years already, Lily. If you'll let me keep waiting, that's all I'll ever ask. Anna smiled, for the first time. Not forced, not guarded, but real. Then, let's start slow. Okay, Mom. Elizabeth nodded again, her tears falling silently, but her heart finally at peace. Slow is perfect, as long as this time we don't have to run anymore. A silver car rolled quietly out of the small town street, leaving behind a humble diner where something more than coffee and conversation had been served, where a new chapter had quietly begun. Anna sat in the passenger seat, her fingers still wrapped around the familiar necklace resting against her chest, the only gift she had ever received from a mother whose face she couldn't remember until today, when that same mother held her in her arms. Nightfall was settling in, washing the treetops in hues of deep indigo. Neither of them spoke, but the silence wasn't heavy. It was soft, like a blanket, gently draped over two hearts that were still aching, still learning how to trust, how to receive, how to love again. From the very beginning, the car turned down a driveway lined with blooming white roses. At the end of the cobblestone path stood a grand old house, elegant, quiet, and warm. Golden light spilled from its windows, as if the home itself was whispering welcome. "This is your house?" Anna asked quietly, her voice full of disbelief. Elizabeth nodded, her tone tender. "It's my house. And if you want, it can be yours too." Anna stepped out of the car. Her eyes moved slowly across the wrought iron gate, the fountain at the center of the courtyard, the clusters of blooming roses along the porch. But then she stopped. What caught her breath wasn't the size of the house. It was a wooden swing, hanging beneath the branches of an old oak tree. She didn't know why, but her heart skipped, thudded, as if something buried had just stirred. "I kept everything," Elizabeth said softly, her voice barely rising above a whisper, as if she were afraid any louder would break the moment. "I couldn't change a thing, because I believed one day you'd come home." Anna stepped closer to the swing. Her hand brushed lightly against the rough rope. She looked up, through the canopy of oak leaves swaying gently above. A scent drifted by roses, faint, familiar. She closed her eyes, and in that instant a memory flashed like lightning. Her own laughter, tiny hands gripping those same ropes, and a woman's voice calling out from a distance, "Lily, be careful." Anna's eyes opened. She turned slowly to Elizabeth, her voice trembling. I think I remember something." Elizabeth stepped beside her, gently placing a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "We don't need to force the memories," she said, calm and sure. "All we need is for your heart to allow them in." Anna nodded. A soft smile curved her lips, equal parts nervous and relieved, like someone who had spent her entire life behind a door she never had the key to, only to realize it was never locked. Not really. Elizabeth held out her arm, and together they walked toward the house. Home, inside. It wasn't anything like the cold, sterile mansions Anna had seen in movies. Here, everything breathed memory. Family photos lined the walls. A worn piano sat in the corner of the living room. And then there was Lily's room, untouched, preserved, waiting. The walls were still painted a soft pastel blue. A small bookshelf stood in the corner, filled with fairy tales, some worn, some barely opened. And behind the door, hanging as if it had never been moved, was the yellow dress, the birthday dress. Anna stood in the middle of the room, her eyes filling with tears. I don't know if I can call this place home yet," she said quietly. "But I know one thing. It doesn't feel like a stranger anymore." Elizabeth smiled, pulling her daughter into a warm, steady embrace. "Then we'll rebuild what home means from the ground up, one step at a time. And this time, I'm not letting you go." Time moved faster than Anna expected. It had been nearly a month since she first stepped into the mansion, a place she entered as a stranger, but where she was received with the eyes of a mother who had never stopped seeing her as a daughter. In the beginning, everything felt foreign. She didn't know where to sit at dinner. She wasn't used to someone knocking to open her door each morning. And most of all, she wasn't used to the feeling that someone was truly waiting for her to come home every night. But little by little, Elizabeth helped Anna relearn what it meant to live like someone who is loved. They looked through old photo albums together, watered roses in the garden that once was Lily's playground. Some afternoons, Elizabeth would sit at the piano, her fingers gently dancing over the keys, humming softly, "You Are My Sunshine." And without knowing why, Anna's tears would fall. Not out of pain, but as if a stream long dammed had finally found its way free. One evening, they sat side by side beside the fountain, the sky tinted gold, the water glimmering between them. Anna turned to her mother and asked quietly, "Do you ever blame me for not recognizing you sooner?" Elizabeth took her daughter's hand, shaking her head gently. "No, because I know you've spent your whole life trying to do your best, even when no one showed you how." Anna looked deep into her mother's eyes, and now those eyes weren't just a reflection of her own. They were a mirror to memories long hidden, now gently illuminated. "I used to believe I didn't deserve a family," Anna whispered. "I thought if someone truly wanted to keep me, they wouldn't have lost me in the first place." Elizabeth's voice caught. She pulled her daughter into her arms and held her close. "I used to think the same about myself, that if I had been better, more careful, you wouldn't have been taken, have." She exhaled shakily, then added, "But I've come to understand love isn't measured by perfection. It's measured by whether we keep finding our way back to each other." Anna rested her head on her mother's shoulder, feeling, for the first time in her life, whole. Not because of the wealth that surrounded her, but because here, in the arms of a mother who had spent 2 decades searching for her, she had finally been chosen. That afternoon, as golden sunlight poured over the garden, Elizabeth said something that made Anna pause. "I've prepared the paperwork," she said softly, "so you can reclaim your true birth name." Anna looked up. For the first time, she felt no fear, no overwhelm, just a quiet, steady flame of hope rising in her chest. "Lily Grace Harrington," Elizabeth whispered, "if you want, you can be that little girl once again." Anna smiled, a smile without hesitation, without distance. "No," she said, "I don't need to go back to being that little girl, because now I know who I am." Elizabeth looked at her daughter, her eyes full of pride and love. "And who are you?" she asked gently. Anna squeezed her mother's hand, her voice steady and sure. "I am your daughter, and I'm here to stay." Anna had once believed she was born simply to survive. Nothing more, nothing less. She had grown accustomed to living among people who came and went, had wrapped herself in the armor of self-reliance, strong, resilient, but cold and heavy. So when real love finally knocked love that asked for nothing in return, love that did not bind or bargain, she didn't know how to open her heart, didn't know how to step inside without trembling. But Elizabeth did. She didn't try to fix Anna. She didn't impose the image of the little 5-year-old Lily onto the young woman before her. She simply showed up every day, every meal, every embrace, as if to say, "You don't have to do anything, just be here. That's enough." And that quiet patience, that unconditional love, began to heal the deepest wounds within Anna, wounds that no therapist had ever touched, because they didn't need analysis, they needed love. One early summer morning, Anna woke early by her own choice. She walked into the kitchen, made a simple breakfast toast, eggs, and fresh orange juice, then carried the tray out to the balcony, where Elizabeth was reading. "Eat, Mom." Anna smiled. "It's the first time I've ever cooked for someone without being asked." Elizabeth took the tray, her eyes shimmering. "Thank you, sweetheart. I'm not hungry, but I'm starving for moments like this." They laughed, a genuine, effortless laugh, as if all the distance between them had simply melted away. A few weeks later, Elizabeth held a private press conference. No fanfare, no flashing cameras. She only wanted to say one thing. "For 20 years, I searched for the most precious thing I ever lost, my daughter. And today, I want the world to know I found her. Not through technology or money, but through a heart that never gave up." The press conference lasted only minutes, but afterward, thousands poured in with comments, messages, and personal stories. Stories of people who had lost loved ones. Stories of those who had once given up hope. Stories from those who carried a hole in their hearts and wondered, is there still a chance? The story of Elizabeth and Anna isn't just about reunion. It's a reminder that true love never truly gets lost. It may be delayed, it may be buried deep, but if you keep it alive, it will find its way back home. That afternoon, Anna herself replaced the sign on her bedroom door. No longer guest room, but Lily's room returned, and beneath it, she taped a small note. "Love needs no conditions. only persistence. As the sun dipped behind the leafy trees in the garden, Elizabeth sat quietly by the window, watching her daughter Anna, or rather Lily, laugh and play with the gardeners outside. That laughter she once believed she'd never hear again. And now it rang out clear, near, like an old melody played anew in a world reborn. Elizabeth needed nothing more. She had reclaimed the most precious thing time had ever taken from her. Not her career, not her fame, but a bond no one could ever replace: motherhood. And Anna, the girl who once thought she was abandoned, now understood she had never been forgotten. She didn't need to be the Lily of the past, because she has become the Lily of today, strong, loving, forgiving, and brave enough to open her heart to a future she once feared to dream of. If you have ever lost someone to time, misunderstandings, or distance, this story is for you. If you have ever lived with doubt, wondering if you are truly worthy of love, if you are waiting for someone to come back, or hesitating to knock on the door of the past to apologize, to forgive, or simply to say, "I still remember," do it, because miracles don't always come, but sometimes just one small gesture, one question, one look, one embrace is enough to start a life anew. If Elizabeth and Anna's story touched your heart, please share it, because somewhere out there, someone may be needing a reason to believe I am not forgotten. I deserve to be loved. I can find or rebuild what I thought was lost. Have you ever waited for a miracle? Share your story in the comments below. You never know, your words might be the key for someone who feels lost.